This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I'm your current host, John Nelson, and in this episode, we'll be looking again at ReadySide Up, and this time we'll be looking at the shelter classification. If you remember from the past two videos, we've gone over food and water. This one's on shelter. Then we have security, economics, community, and fitness left in our 7 classifications for ReadySide Up. What is ReadySide Up? ReadySide Up is how you build readiness, resiliency, and self reliance against personal, natural, and societal disaster. It differs from prepping in that prepping seems to just focus on big doom and gloom scenarios. Um, but prepping, ReadySide Up also focuses on mundane and the more simplistic things in life. Anything that can undermine your effort in life, can get you to bend your will to the will of somebody else, or just completely derail where you want your life to go. That's the purpose of ReadySide Up, is protecting against those things. So let's get into shelter. Shelter is protection from weather. It's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's power. It's trash, and it's so many other things. You know, the, your shelter is one of your greatest assets, and it's one of the things you will want to make sure that you have, not only for yourself but for your children. Being a habitual renter is a very unstable position to be in, but also having a large mortgage and not actually owning your house is also a very unstable position to be in. But that's not necessarily the primary purpose of what we're discussing. Well, I'll go over right now the questions that I would ask my clients when doing a readiness audit to get a sense of what their shelter is and isn't to them, and what aspects of their shelter could need some improvement. So let's go. So, primary home, do they own or rent? And I would also ask about equity, what equity they have in their mortgage, etc. So, if they rented, I'd be looking at ways they might be able to become an owner. If they are an owner with a mortgage, I'd be looking at ways that they could uh, refinance or pay down that mortgage, or get a family member to pay off the mortgage and then be in debt to the family member or somebody more trusted than a bank. Next question: are there any homeowners associations associated with their property? Simple yes or no question, but then if yes, we'd be looking at what kind of rules the homeowners association has, and that also goes for renting. If they are a renter, doesn't mean that they can't be ready side up. We need to know what kind of landlord they have. If their landlord is open to the idea of them gardening, or even having livestock, or changing something about the infrastructure on the inside of the house or exterior of the house, we need to get a sense of what kind of rules are in place on their property. And with that, with the homeowners association and all that, we're also looking at liens, encumbrances, and easements that might be on the property. So just because you own a property and you don't are not part of a homeowners association doesn't mean that your title is free and clear. There could be other people who have interest in that property. Your property could be in some sort of conservation easement where you're not allowed to do certain things, or the neighbors could have a right away through your property, and that would limit how you can use your land, etc. Also, things like liens, like if you owe somebody money and they come after you, like a contractor's lien. Is a contractor's lien is something, if you fail to pay a contractor, they can put a lien on your house and say, if and when you sell that house, I'm taking a slice of that sale because you failed to pay me for the work I did. So any of those kind of things will be a vulnerable position on their shelter. Next, we're looking at some of the functionality of the shelter. What kind of heating system do they have? What condition is it? What type of fuel type does it use? What additional heating sources do they have? Because you're going to want some redundancy. I come from a northern climate, so I'm more focused on the heat, but you could also be focused on the air conditioning side of thing if you come from a cooling climate. But in New Hampshire, where I'm at, if your primary heating source goes down in the middle of winter, you're going to want another way to heat your house and heat it quick. Do they have a grill or additional way to cook? This could be a camping stove or anything else. But since power is part of shelter, this is going at like, how are you going to cook your food if there was a prolonged power outage, that sort of thing. So continuing on functionality of a house, we're looking at insulation and air tightness. It seems small, but it can really erode one's pocketbook over time. If you're, especially the air tightness, if your house is really leaking a lot of air, you're spending a lot of extra money on heating or air conditioning, and that's money that you could be investing elsewhere. So there might be, depending on the property, there might be some small tips and tricks that one can do to save one's pocketbook. More particular if they have a wood stove or fireplace or any kind of wood burning appliance, is do they have acreage for firewood harvest? Also, how many acres do they have in general? But looking at forested hardwoods and how many acres they have, would they be able to sustainably support themselves heating wise off the land they have, or will they need to be looking elsewhere? And in the food classification, we went over if there's public lands around, and that's another thing that could become useful in more of a SHTF situation. Is if you need to heat yourself and there's no trees on your property, you might be going to some public lands and trying to take some from there. I'm not encouraging anyone break the laws. Look into what the rules of the public lands are, of course. Firewood storage practices go along with that, but that would be another question. Oh, maybe I didn't talk about public lands and food. Here I ask about public lands nearby, so I was getting ahead of myself. What is the acreage of those public lands? Is their house on or off grid? And if it's off grid, what do they have for solar or wind, or how are they generating electricity? If they're on grid, or even if they're off grid, what do they have for backup power sources like generators and things like that? What type of fuel sources do those things use? Are there generators on some sort of switch? Are they manual? Is it a fully automatic system? Just get them to explain what they got. I have found a lot of people who are not necessarily super into building readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance, or people who would not call themselves preppers. When you ask, what would you do in a prolonged power outage, they say, well, I'm good. I have a backup generator. And then you say, well, how long does that backup generator last? So, like, if the tank's full, it should last about 2 weeks. And then you say, what about after 2 weeks? And that's where the conversation ends. They can't fathom prolonged power outage lasting more than 2 weeks, but they should. Septic or sewer. So if you live in the country, you're going to have a septic system most likely, and if you live in the city, you're going to have a sewer system. What is the age of this septic system, and what kind of maintenance have they been performing on it? Some people don't even know that they have to perform maintenance on a septic. But also, if you have to replace it, that's going to be a costly expense that's going to, again, take away from money you could be putting elsewhere. Could also be an opportunity to introduce them into humanure. or an outhouse or some very alternative means of getting rid of bodily waste. What kinds of gates or fences do they have on the property? That kind of goes more into security, but also into animals. It's just an infrastructure question in general, but it can go to either of those purposes of corralling animals or even being an obstacle for intruders. Do they have any additional properties? And then get them to explain what those properties are and what the benefits of that property are. Would that be a bug out location potentially? If that's not a bug out location, do they have another bug out location? I generally don't think it's advised for most people in a rural setting to be bugging out anywhere. It's more of a thing for city people, because cities could get nasty really quick. But it's good to have a bug out plan nonetheless. So, what does that bug out plan look like? Is it, well, we're just going to grab anything we can and head to Aunt Jemima's house? Well, that might not be the best strategy. You'll want to think about that a lot more. I would have that conversation with those people. Something simple here. Do they have a clothesline? A means. I know this is kind of jumping all over the place. Do they have a clothesline alternative means, wash bucket and wash pan alternative means for washing clothing if the power was outage? As part of my report, I would also take an aerial photo of their property. Just use Google Earth or something, and get a sense of how their property is situated and what else is around. Electrical panel, security, how the power comes to one's house. It could be such that it could be very easy to sabotage the power coming into one's house if there's evildoers wishing to do an attack. What is the And then a couple questions of the building method. So, like, what would the foundation or basement look like? What kind of access would it have into it? What does the wall and siding assembly of the house look like? What's the roof made out of? The complete exterior, getting a sense not only from a maintenance standpoint of, is this house going to rot, or is it well constructed and is pretty durable? There's siding and roofing that would make your house resistant to forest fire and things like that. But then there's also building material that's just going to turn to mush in a couple of years if you don't upkeep it. So getting a sense of all those aspects, but also from the security standpoint of how secure the house is. What kind of trash practices the people might have. If trash services go away for any extended period of time, is there alternative ways of disposing of trash? Is there an area away from humans that they can be dumping stuff? And this kind of also goes into the composting, which we did talk about in the food classification, of getting rid of food waste. You don't want to be attracting, mice, rats, flies, anything that supposedly carry disease. So you don't want to be attracting things like that. So trash practices. And then I would also ask just about general property use. And I like to, I've never taken a permaculture design course. I'm not even all that well read up on permaculture, but I do understand the concept of the permaculture zones. So I'd be looking at areas that they travel most, and I'd be encouraging people to invest their efforts into the areas most readily accessible to them or most visited. So don't, and I've been guilty of this myself, don't put your garden way out in the middle of your field. when you can move it much closer to your house where you travel every day, and you're going to give it a lot more attention, and therefore you'll get a better yield. Or same thing with livestock or compost or anything you're going to do on your property. A workshop. Don't position your workshop, on the other side of your property. Uh, put it close by. So so yeah, property uses that would go into existing structures that they might have, and also structures that they intend to build, or things that they intend to do on the property. And I'd be looking at all of that. So that is a quick summary of the shelter classification and the questions I would be asking. Sure, there's things I'm missing. I haven't looked at this assessment in several months, so it's probably time to do an audit and update it. But if you have anything you'd like to add, please put it in the comments. And yeah, please like and share this video. I hope that you're getting value out of these ReadySide Up videos. And in a couple more weeks, we'll have the whole series done, and hopefully that will position you and your loved ones in a much better position to survive anything that life throws your way. So, this is 7th Generation Warfare. I'm your current host, John Nelson, and this was ReadySide Up Shelter Questions. Thank you.